Well, hello, good morning. I think we all got a real radio voice after last night. Welcome to this session. Welcome that you're all here. My name is Liedewij Hensnaar. I'm part of the program group for Radio Days. And, welcome to this another great radio session. For this session, we're looking at the power of radio. Well, I don't need to tell anybody here what the power of radio is. But sometimes we don't make as much use of its power and reach as we could. However, we present to you today 2 examples of the power of radio. And when we put aside all our internal competition and when we focus on the power and impact of the message rather than on our internal station, and when we are motivated by the greater good of society above anything else, then we can have 2 really good examples. In this session, we will hear from Ireland and the UK who have just done that. They saw a greater good, either for the radio stations as a whole or for society, and they acted upon. They used the medium that they have, which is a wide range of radio stations spanning the country. And on the same day, at the same time, on all the radio stations. But think about this for a moment. All the radio stations in your country, the youth stations, the classical stations, the news stations, which is really, really, really impactful. So how do you get everybody on board? How do you nail the creative task with this? We're going to hear how this was done in Ireland and how this was done in the UK. We will have time for questions afterwards. After what would be 35 minutes or something. But first, let's hear from Mark Cunning. He's CEO of iRadio. He's a youth station in Ireland and a member of the IBI. And after that, from Lucy Barrett, she's client director of Radio Centre UK and our president of the World Radio Alliance, I believe. And George Butler from Radio Centre as well. He's head of marketing. Please put your hands together first for Mark. Mark, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for choosing myself, George, and Lucy over Heather Small, because what Heather Small doesn't know, and what maybe you don't know, is Heather Small is not a superhero. But it's a pleasure to be in a room full of superheroes this morning. You're looking at me like you don't know that I know. You're superheroes. You've got the power. You were bitten by the bug, the radio bug. And you've got a load of superpowers that we're going to talk about this morning. Spoiler alert, I'm going to play you a brief clip from the latest Spider-Man movie. There's a big spoiler, so if you haven't seen it, I'm really sorry, but it's important that you see this.
She told me that with great power
comes great responsibility.
Wait, what? How do you know that?
Uncle Ben said it the day he died.
With great power comes great responsibility. When we were applying for our license for iRadio a few years ago, I wanted to put that in the title. My chairman wouldn't let me, so I was determined to get it in somewhere because it's one of my favorite phrases that I use when talking about radio. With great power comes great responsibility. So I told you I was thrilled to be in a room with so many different superheroes. You've got great powers. You've got the power to excite, to entertain, to delight, to engage, to introduce, inform, and the main one, the biggest superpower that you've got is the power to influence. And this morning, I want to talk a little bit about how we can work together as an industry to influence. My name is Mark Cunning. I'm the CEO and Content Director at iRadio in Ireland. With great power comes great responsibility. You're going to hear that a lot from me this morning. So we talked about superheroes. Look at all the villains. YouTube, TikTok, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook. They've come in and they have taken our listeners' attention. And worse than that, they've taken our revenue. And we use them, but they're using us as well. So imagine for a second, because we're radio people, we're good at imagining. Imagine flicking through all those apps and seeing a unified message on the front screen of every app. So you open your Facebook, you've got some kind of messaging, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. It would take a big imagination. Imagine flicking through your 37 or your 444 television channels and seeing the same message on every channel at the same time. Unless you're watching Russian state TV, it's not likely to happen anytime soon. Imagine sitting in traffic and flicking along the dial and hearing the same message on every single radio station. Imagine how powerful that would be. Imagine the impact it could have. Well, what if your radio stations put aside their differences? We do. Two countries in Europe, Ireland and the UK, who have worked industry-wide, industry-wide to do this. So George and Lucy will talk to you a little bit later on about Radio Centre. I'm going to talk about what we do in Ireland. And yes, there's the border, but let's not go there at the moment. So radio industry in Ireland then, we're one of two countries who work collaboratively to deliver these kind of campaigns. In Ireland, it's coordinated by Choose Radio, now the Radio Centre Ireland, for IBI, which is the Independent Broadcasters of Ireland, and RTE. So let me briefly tell you about Ireland's love affair with radio, because Ireland loves radio. In our last listenership, JNLR 2021-4, we found that 80% of adults over the age of 15 listen to radio in Ireland every single day. That's 3.2 million who daily listen to us, and the average Irish listener listens for 4 hours. We're talking about superheroes. Here are the superheroes in Ireland. These are our Avengers. And if iRadio at the top, my station is the Iron Man, then perhaps Beat 102, 103 would be Captain America. Cork's 96 might be the Incredible Hulk. We all have our skill sets. We all have things that we're good at. We all do different things. But when the time comes, we ask our Avengers to assemble. And what I want to talk to you about today is how in your country you can get your Avengers to assemble. There's 4 things you need. You need agreement and collaboration between stations and groups. You need a cause or a reason. You need great creative. And you need to appoint an independent body or individual to look after everything. So let's dig into number 1. And don't worry, I got some great copy on the way for you as well. So number 1, agreement and collaboration. This is for the greater good. Yes, they stole your drive time presenter. Yes, they claim to be number 1 in the market when you know that's not true. And yes, their Christmas promotion was a bit more successful than yours, but you've got to put it aside. It's for the greater good. It's got to positively affect your listener, the industry, or it's got to make a difference. Is there something that you can buy into, an initiative? You got to use it sparingly. We're not doing this in Q4 because hopefully, touch wood, come Christmas time, we've got no ad space to do this. So there's certain times of the year this will work, certain times that it won't. And you've got to put aside those competitive differences. You've got to have a cause or a reason. This has got to be something that's relevant to all listeners across all demographics of all stations. So in Ireland, this has to work from the southern tip of Cork to the northern tip of Mallinhead to Dublin to Sligo and even to Durrow in County Laois. It's got to appeal to every audience member from the age of 9 to 90, and it's got to be emotive. It's got to be something that really pops for the industry. Great creative is key, and I'm going to play you some great creative very shortly. The copy has to pop across all stations, all formats, broad appeal, as I said. It's got to engage listeners from 9 to 90. Does it serve to enhance the radio industry in your country? If it's great copy, trust me, it will. And that audio piece has got to make the listener stop in their tracks, pay attention and listen. And most importantly, from my point of view, you've got to appoint an individual or an independent body to look after this, because otherwise it gets a little bit political. So it's got to be somebody that's respected within the industry, has no alignment or allegiances with a station or a group, and can look after the admin, approve and distribute that copy, because there's a lot of back and forth, and of course look after the PR and the post-campaign analysis and that. So time for some great copy. In Ireland in 2009, something weird happened. RTE, the state broadcaster, and the independent broadcasters worked together like bananas. The picture here is my now chairman of iRadio, Willie O'Reilly, and Claire Dignam of RTE, who stood beside each other for a photo. These guys here, Ray Darcy and Ryan Tubridy, 2 huge presenters in Ireland. At the time this picture was taken in 2009, they were in the same slot. Ray in the independent station Today FM, and Ryan in the state broadcaster RT Radio 1. So when it comes to ratings, these guys were head to head. But the radio industry had been criticised for not being a visual medium with the rise of social media. So Nice to Meet You was the first campaign from Choose Radio, and it demonstrates the power of radio as a visual medium.
I've only got one eyebrow. Now, it's not like it got shaved off after some stag and never grew back. I was just born this way. Unfortunately, the one eyebrow I have is slightly arched, so I've always looked like I've just had an evil idea. Now, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but right now I'm in the nip. The thing is, I'm allergic to clothes. I come out in an awful reaction. I put on some pants this morning and my leg flared right up. So now on my upper thigh I still have a rash in the shape of some mad Elrone's head. Did I mention I'm Samoan? Well, half Samoan, half Tongolese, but raised in Ireland. I've a very large ginger moustache. I'm 7 foot tall and I weigh about 300 pounds. Now, I'm trying to lose weight, so I got one of those vibrating plates that Madonna swears by. I'm on it right now, all 300 quivering pounds of me. So to recap, I have one creepy evil eyebrow, I'm a 300 pound, 7 foot tall, naked, half Samoan, half Tongolese, ginga moustache wearing, vibrating man who has a rash on his upper thigh in the shape of an one's head. It's nice to meet you.
When you advertise, choose radio, the most visual medium in the world. Brought to you by RTE Radio and the Independent Broadcasters of Ireland.
So we're talking about superheroes. In 1916, a group of brave Irish volunteers stood on the steps of the GPO in the centre of Dublin and they proclaimed an Irish Republic. How best to communicate it? With radio. Ireland's first broadcast was on the 25th of April 1916 when a brave group of volunteers climbed onto the roof of the telegraphy building in Dublin. They erected an aerial and they sent out a signal via Morse code. It was heard as far as stations in Germany. It was even reported to have been heard by fishermen in Japan. It was the work of Irish volunteer James Connolly, translated to Morse code by David Burke, and it was the brainchild of Joseph Mary Plunkett. 100 years later, to the minute, 2016, 25th of April at 5:30 p.m, Irish radio broadcast on a clock start the message that had been broadcast in Ireland 100 years ago, Ireland's first ever radio broadcast. Imagine sitting in traffic going home and flicking through the stations and hearing this across every single Irish radio station.
Irish Republic declared in Dublin today. Irish troops have captured the city and are in full possession. Enemy cannot move in city. The whole country rising.
This is the sound of Ireland's first radio broadcast, transmitted at this exact time, on this exact date, 100 years ago today. The declaration of an Irish Republic, broadcast in Dublin, heard around the world. This is the sound of Irish radio, on air since 1916. Brought to you by RTE Radio and the Independent Broadcasters of Ireland. To find out more, visit thesoundof16.ie.
Unbelievably powerful. Sound of 16, unsurprisingly, trended top in Ireland on that day. Have we any parents in the room? Show of hands. Yeah, a few. Okay, so I'm a dad. My son Charlie is 8, my daughter Ella is 5, and they're doing serious, intense swimming lessons at the moment because we're finally getting to go on holiday after 3 years of kind of hanging around the back garden. And it's so important to me that they're able to swim. And I want to play for you a bit of copy that was written by Chris Clarkin from creative agency Boys and Girls. Chris was talking yesterday at Radio Days about how to write great audio branding ads. This is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful pieces of audio that I've ever played. I've listened to it a lot getting prepared for this session. I want to talk about industry initiatives and, you know, that audio that's got to pop. This, to me, is the prime example.
Oh, Daddy, Daddy, look at me, look at me. Daddy, Daddy, look at me. Daddy, Daddy, look at me, look at me. Daddy, Daddy, look at me. Look at me. Daddy.
Look away for a moment, and they could be taken away forever. Visit swimireland.ie to learn how to be a lifesaver this Drowning Prevention Week.
Run across radio stations in Ireland, I talk about, having a great cause or initiative. How, as a PD or CEO, could you say no to running that copy? Campaigns like that take a little bit of back and forth. They take agreement around timings, around how many spots we're going to run. There's a lot of back and forth, and we're used to that in Ireland because we've been working together since 2009. And because we've been working collaboratively and together, sometimes something happens and you just got to turn it round. So on the 15th of January 2018, Irish radio lost Dolores O'Riordan, the front woman of the Cranberries, and the country went into mourning because she was one of the best. So the next day at 12 o'clock, every radio station played Dolores' song, When You're Gone. It seemed fitting, and again, unsurprisingly, hashtag When You're Gone trended across Ireland. So not a campaign this time, but Irish radio working together to mourn together. The video I found on Twitter shows the power of flicking through the dial. Some stations obviously better at clock timing than others, but we'll not go there. So, you know, our Avengers assemble, but sometimes there's a little bit of conflict, there's a little bit of tension between Captain America and Iron Man, and this was the case when we ran the last piece of copy I'm going to play for you this morning. It was called Father-in-Law. Joe Duffy, prolific presenter in Ireland, he presents an afternoon talk show and phone-in show on RT Radio 1, the biggest radio station in Ireland. Joe was not happy. He called this ad revolting. He wanted it pulled from RT Radio 1. He didn't want it played in his show. He was disgusted, and Joe did us a massive favour because he carried a 20-minute talk-minute segment on his show about the piece of audio. So thank you, Joe. Personally, this is my favourite piece of audio that we've done through the Choose Radio initiative. I'll let you decide if it's distasteful or not. I think it's a fantastic example of the power of radio. This was titled Father-in-Law.
Your father-in-law is a great guy, but you don't want to see him today because right now you're in the gym changing room. He gives you an enthusiastic wave and a thumbs up, which makes his towel fall down. He bends over, slowly, his body stiff from a step aerobics class. You see everything, in all its sweaty glory. Sticks in your head, doesn't it? And they say radio isn't visual. Don't underestimate the power of a radio ad. Choose radio.ie.
Your naked father-in-law or Heather Small. There's no contest. I love that audio. It's so powerful. So, Avengers Assemble. Some takeaways from me. Number one, guys, agreement and collaboration between stations. Get over it. This is for the greater good. Number two, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to find that cause or the reason. Number three, we need great creative. Hopefully, you'll agree that some of the creative I've let you hear this morning ticks that box. And finally, and most importantly, appoint an independent body or individual to coordinate. You're going to need them. So, my final thought, with great power comes great responsibility and endless opportunity. You're superheroes. You were bitten by the bug. You've got the superpowers. Please use them. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Mark. That was amazing. We are obviously all radio superheroes. I'd say you're like Wonder Woman.
Yeah. I'm not sure who you would be.
Banana
George.
Man. Hello. My name's George, this is Lucy. We work at Radio Centre with the industry body for UK commercial radio, and we're here today to talk about a project that we're fortunate enough to work on. It's called the Mental Health Minute. Now, I'll get on to what it's all about very shortly, but I just want to take a step back first and look at why the project was conceived. Because there's no two ways of putting it. Mental health is one of the world's biggest health crises. In the UK alone, 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health issues every single year. And despite that, there's still a huge stigma around it. We don't really talk about it as much. That was certainly the case 5 years ago when the idea for the Mental Health Minute first came about. We were with Roger, who's here in the room today, and we knew that radio could make a significant impact in continuing what needs to be a really important conversation about mental health. Because, as we all know in this room, despite radio's huge reach, despite the fact it reaches millions and millions of people every single day, people living their lives, just getting on with the usual things that they're doing, despite that incredible reach, it's also got an incredible ability to be really personal, intimate, and have a brilliant connection. And that means it can have really important conversations. These important conversations which millions of people hear. And that's why we knew radio had the capability to make a difference. But we also knew it would be most powerful and it would make the biggest difference if it was united.
So yeah, Roger and some other people gave the task to George and I to unite 500 commercial, BBC and community stations. We knew not only would it be very, very powerful, but we also knew it would be historic because it had never been done. But that meant there were huge challenges to overcome. But we also knew that we needed to bring in a mental health partner because, you know, George and I work in advertising, marketing and radio. We really don't know about mental health, and you have to be tread very carefully with it. And the Royal Foundation of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, so for those of you who don't know, they're our future King and Queen of England, known more commonly as Kate and William, had recently launched a groundbreaking campaign called Heads Together to talk about mental health, to stop the stigma of it. And they also had a web of charitable partners who were experts in the field. And we kind of thought they'd be really, really great if we could kind of team up with them. But, you know, we didn't have an open door to royalty. But, you know, it was almost meant to be because we were having a bake sale in our office and we shared a floor with lots of different radio, kind of smaller, like Radar, who measure radio at the time, a bake sale. At which we were raising money for Heads Together, and they got slightly the wrong end of the stick. And George got a meeting with them to talk about our bake sale. And obviously, it goes without saying that they did not expect it to go from, you know, baking brownies to perhaps a massive broadcast, historic broadcast moment. But luckily, they got it, and we got escalated to the right people very, very quickly. But then what followed was kind of a chicken and egg situation, because the royals would only commit if all the broadcasters were on board. And the broadcasters wanted to know if the royals were on board. But thankfully, and I won't go into too much of the negotiation details, we did manage to persuade all the parties that it was worth doing. And, you know, definitely the presence of royalty and the chance to make history were enough to get everyone to come in behind the project. But if we were going to do something historical, we wanted to make sure the audio was right. It had to hit 500 people at the same time, so it had to be good. And, you know, we've done some pretty good ads at Radio Centre and some pretty good messaging, but we kind of thought we needed help with this one. So we went to content agency Something Else, which I'm sure some of you will know. They're a really, really cool content company. And they created a concept that would involve famous voices. But we went round the houses on those concepts, and because we just had 60 seconds. The idea was that we would run something. I think, as Rog told us, that it would be best if it went out around 11 o'clock. So we worked out that 10:59 was the right time to do it. And we'd have 60 seconds to explain what was going on, why we were doing it, and land a really, really important message to the nation. And ideas came and went. And actually, there was one I remember, which you'll probably remember as well, which is they asked us to get everybody to turn over the stations, to tell the audience to switch stations to hear the same message. But I'm not a radio programmer, but I'm pretty sure that most programmers would say no for fear that the listeners wouldn't turn back. But, you know, we did eventually nail on a very simple, unique message, and we brought together royalty, possibly one of the world's biggest pop stars, an Academy Award actress, and amongst others, athletes, to tell people, or tell 20 million people, that it was okay to talk about mental health. So this is the very first Mental Health Minute.
Right now, for the very first time, radio stations all over the UK are coming together to broadcast the same thing, at the same time. Hundreds of stations, millions of listeners.
Because no matter who you are, or what station you listen to, news or new wave, politics or punk, Gershwin or Lady Gaga.
All of us have moments when life is tough, and sometimes you just need someone to talk to. Because taking care of your mental health is important for everyone. Whether you listen to songs by Prince on the radio to get out of your head, or you're an actual Prince on the radio.
Just starting a conversation on mental health could make all the difference. When you talk about something, you have less reason to fear it.
If you do have the courage to speak about it, you really can make things better.
This simple message can make a big difference. That's why radio is coming together today to talk about mental health.
How are you feeling today? It's okay to say.
So every radio station played that out at the exact same time. And we were so grateful to all of those stations for really supporting this project, and of course to the charity partners who were had the passion and the vigour to back it. It was a little moment of radio history, but we couldn't have anticipated the impact that it had. It was a reminder in a busy modern media landscape, the power that radio has. So much so that for the 5 years that followed, we've done it every year since. It's become an annual broadcast, which is an amazing thing, but equally at the same time, a big challenge, because we need to make sure that it sounds fresh and relevant, and every year has more impact and bigger effect than the last. But of course, back in 2018, when the first Mental Health Minute happened, we can never have anticipated what the world had in store just 2 years later. And I mean, look, you don't need me to explain the impact that COVID has had on people's mental health. In May 2020, a time of obvious crisis, radio stepped up once again. It came together, and we recorded the 2020 Mental Health Minute at a time when nobody could leave the house. So it felt really, really powerful in a period where millions of people were turning to radio for daily companionship, for trusted news and entertainment. It felt really powerful that the nation united to hear how we are all connected and not alone. And this is it.
This is a significant moment. Almost every station in the country is broadcasting this message. You are connected to 20 million people by the power of radio for this year's Mental Health Minute.
We're living through a time which is taking its toll on everyone in different ways. We can all feel scared, alone, and confused.
And that's okay. Right now, we all need each other more than ever. And in the weeks and months ahead of us, we will all have an important role to play in being there for one another.
Whether you're united in applause on a Thursday night, smiling at a neighbour's rainbow-filled window, or listening to the radio at home or at work, remember, you're not alone.
We're all connected, and sometimes just talking about how you're feeling can make a big difference. So right now, let's join together across the UK and reach out to someone.
If you're struggling, it's important to talk about it. Or if you know someone who is acting differently, it's okay to ask how they are. Use this moment to send a message. Because we're all connected.
And you are not alone.
The impact that had and the reception that it had from audiences was quite overwhelming, actually. Obviously a very confusing time, and the kind of confusion and unknown of that period was followed by a very, very challenging year, a scary, confusing year. We were coming in and out of lockdown, and obviously the toll of the pandemic impacted everybody's mental health. So in 2021, UK Radio once again granted us access to their immense audience of 20 million daytime listeners. But we wanted to put out a message of hope for everybody listening. We wanted to, it was a message of hope and unity. It was written by a brilliant poet, a mental health activist called Hussein Manoa. It was voiced by David Beckham, Jamie Oliver, Shirley Bassey, and more, including the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. If you'd like to hear it, it's, I think, one of the most powerful ones. We don't have time today, but do check it out on YouTube. Because, you know, as Lucy said, we wanted to make sure that the creative every year adapted and it changed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we deliver to stations and how we brief and prepare them and get everybody on board broadcasting the same thing at the same time. Because obviously we send them the final audio file, and along with that, they get teaser trails, audio for news bulletins and breakfast shows, social media, toolkits, assets and videos, of course, production notes, suggested intro and outro, mental health advice, terminology, guidance for terminology for mental health, plus, of course, expert guests, which mean that programming is built around this moment. So it's not just a minute that airs on the radio. There's a whole morning of programming built around it, and that just amplifies the conversation. I wanted to play for you now a little taste of how all of that is used and played out across radio.
Well, Radio 2 now joins hundreds of radio stations to recognise Mental Health Awareness Week, the Mental Health Minute, with a very important message that, be it through uniting in applause or simply by listening to the radio, we're all connected and you are not alone.
And I just wanted to take this time out to tell you about something that is really important to me. We're calling it the Mental Health Minute.
This is BBC Radio 4. As part of Mental Health Awareness Week, which begins today, we now unite with hundreds of radio stations across the UK.
This is Absolute Radio, just before 11 o'clock this morning, and there's a very important message that everyone at Absolute Radio knows, that whether it's uniting in applause on a Thursday night or simply by listening to the radio, we're all connected and you are not alone.
The Mental Health Minute is just a little reminder that it is completely okay to feel that way and you are 100% not on your own.
The opening movement of Georges Enescu's Decade. We are uniting with hundreds of radio stations across the UK and some recognisable voices too for the Mental Health Minute.
It's 11 o'clock on Monday morning, the 18th of May, and that was the Mental Health Minute. That was heard by over 20 million people just then, and that is what progress, what incredible progress that is.
So, results. We've been asked to talk about what actually it meant happening. So, you know, we knew that if all UK united, it would be a pretty powerful moment. But we didn't know quite how big an impact it would have. And I have to say, from the word go, particularly helped, I think, by having royalty and famous people on board, it trended worldwide and has continued to do each year. It's been written about in really, really famous publications all around the world. It has a worldwide impact of over 1 billion people. The project has won awards, but I have to tell you, that is one of the unintended consequences of it. It's never been about awards. Radio is and should be seen as a force for good. With all the criticism aimed at other mediums like social media, it's never been more important that we kind of play up to the strengths of the relationship and trust that listeners have with their stations and presenters, and we must never lose that. It's created a really positive news story for our medium because it shows the scale and power of radio. The fact that royalty, athletes, music artists and stars of the screens want to be involved in a radio project is clearly no bad thing. And actually in our country, it's even reached the world of politics with MPs wanting to get involved and government departments, specifically this year, and even our Prime Minister has engaged with it. This year, we also had the Mental Health Minute translated into other languages, particularly when we talk about what the theme of this year's was, because it's quite isolating if you don't speak English, particularly at this point in time. So it's expanded our network. It's allowed us to work with mental health partners. And even during the pandemic, we created a spin-off series which ran across radio, providing audiences with tips for coping with those complicated times. But the most important consequence has been the reaction of the audiences. There were thousands of tweets and messages to stations that they've all been kind enough to share with us. Increased activity with our mental health partner. So every year we choose a different partner. You might have seen that on the screen. They have increased activity on those days, but it is not a radio ad, so we cannot promote it during the ad itself. It's the work we do around it. And vitally, radio has provided a platform to continue what is an incredibly important conversation on mental health in households across the nation.
And it's been a privilege for us to work on this project. We're so grateful to everybody who helps make it happen. And in case you might want to do something similar in your own country, we've got 5 key learnings that I wanted to quickly run through. So the first is have a unifying theme, a cause or a message that everybody can rally behind, something that impacts the audiences of every station. Number 2, bring in the right partners. There's no way we would have ever done this project if we didn't have the mental health partners on board, because A, we needed their expertise, and they also added legitimacy to the project. It wouldn't have happened without the right partners. 3, think about the universal appeal of the message. If you were broadcasting on every radio station, for us that's 20 million people, over 500 radio stations, there's going to be all different types. Every different kind of person imaginable will be listening to that message. So you need to make sure that the message is relevant to all different types of people. And it's something we are very conscious about. We always think about the words used, the sound used, the voices used, and make sure it's relevant for everybody across the UK. 4 is utilize radio's influence. It's a massive medium. It's huge. Maybe sometimes we even forget how big it is. People want a piece of radio. We found that with this project especially. People want to be involved, and we should always remember that it's a pretty powerful medium. And 5, for a brief moment, forget about competitors.
To echo what Mark said.
Echoing what Mark said there. Embrace collaboration and use radio as a force for good. There's very few other mediums bold and brave enough to work together like radio does and can. And it's something that should absolutely be celebrated. We've seen with both Mark and hopefully with the Mental Health Minute, hopefully you've seen the kind of the impacts and effects that it can have. Collaboration can be a massive secret weapon for radio. I'm sure you all know it. And actually, when we pull together as an industry, we are pretty unstoppable.
So that's probably it, George. Our time is up. But I just want to echo what George says, that it really is an honour to get this to air every year. And everybody who works on it knows that. They know it's a very special project at Kensington Palace and the Royal Foundation to the stations that we work with. But we wanted to leave you with the 5th Mental Health Minute, which only ran last Friday at 10:59. It marks the end of Mental Health Awareness Week. And this year we focused on loneliness. The theme of the week was loneliness, and loneliness is a great thing to grasp for radio. We all know that it does keep people company. It's one of its key need states. So it felt like the right time to be doing it, particularly with what's been happening over the last couple of years. And there's been a marked increase in younger people reporting on that they feel lonely, and this is going to lead to huge mental health issues in the future. But this year, the Duke and Duchess, I never know if I should say their Royal Highnesses, but I think it is their Royal Highnesses, did ask if they could actually record it by themselves. Now, these people are hugely influential. They have massive following. They have their own Instagram account, but they also have loads of Twitter and Instagram accounts from their fans. They have a huge fan base, particularly in America. And the reaction to the recording has been incredible. It really has reached around the world. Even featured on the Good Morning America show covered it. So they're quite possibly the most influential of influencers, and that's often what we say about radio anyway. So if I could just leave you one final thing, please just take a minute to listen to their Royal Highnesses ask the nation to lift someone out of loneliness.
Hello, I'm Catherine.
And I'm William, and we'd like to talk
For just 1 minute about loneliness.
We're all in different places right now.
Not just physically, but mentally.
And we can all feel lonely sometimes.
No matter who or where we are.
We can feel it for many different reasons.
But we can all help each other feel less isolated and more connected.
The past 2 years have really reminded us of the importance of human relationships.
So, if you think someone you know might be feeling lonely, just give them a ring. Send them a text or knock on the door.
Maybe suggest meeting for a cup of tea or a walk.
Because these small acts of kindness can make a big difference and help us all feel less lonely.
So, apologies for interrupting every radio station in the country.
But if we interrupt the lives of those who are feeling alone,
we can help lift them out of loneliness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done?
Questions?
Sorry. Thank you so much. It was really an incredible story. Of course, I've heard it live last week. Do you think this mental minute can be, well, not copied, but inherited in every other country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something which is doable. If we can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, if we can unite UK radio, because we can be sometimes a bit of a dysfunctional family, then I would say anybody can do it.
And I think, it's one of those things where, A, it's really important, and the power of radio can be utilised when we all come together like that. And B, it's a great news story for the medium of radio, and yeah, absolutely, it's something that could definitely be replicated.
But just to Mark's point that he made, do get someone independent to do it. Without a doubt, don't try and do it at your own station yourself. Just get someone else to run it. We were a neutral voice, and actually we had Roger's help at the time because he was running Radio Academy also to help with that process as well.
Because it takes a lot of time and a lot of lobbying, of course.
Yeah, and also, to echo Lucy's...
They were quite keen to come on board. There was just that little bit of, we were like, oh, yeah, the Royals are definitely in. The broadcasters are definitely in. So there was a bit of that, but
and did you get any advertisement extra? I mean, not around a minute, of course, but because they noticed the power of sound, the power of radio.
It's an interesting one because obviously it's a topic which, and it's a message that you don't want advertising around necessarily, but B also it's on the BBC. And it's on certain hospital radio stations and student radio stations who can't carry advertising. So in terms of an advertising partner, it was never something that we would actually be allowed to do. There has been a lot of brands really interested in being associated with the Mental Health Minute. Yes. And, you know, if you had a commercial radio sector where without the public broadcasters, it's definitely an option.
We did have one last year that ran a deliberate ad before it.
Yeah.
But that was with a certain
But they should have
group.
probably worked a little bit closer with us about what the key messaging was.
Okay, because it was
but you know, it was an interesting idea and wasn't one we wanted to put off because they care about mental health as well.
Wow, great. And for you, Mark, Choose Radio. I liked it, of course, as a concept. And I think it's, well, actually, a few years ago here at Radio Days, we talked about a Choose Radio thing, but then across all Europe. That would be great. Yeah. I mean, of course, the difference between the stations, but the difference between the countries as well. But I still think after every year I'm at Radio Days, we should do something, because at least, you know, Spotify is always Spotify. They can advertise across every country the same thing. And we with radio, I mean, we know all the power of radio. We should, well, maybe next year come across with a great campaign all around the world.
No pressure,
Just
Mark.
radio.
No,
I think Mark's got to do that one. The naked father-in-law.
I think it's a really good point. I think, you know, there's no reason that European-wide you couldn't run the Mental Health Minute. It crosses boundaries and countries. I think when we talk about some of the Choose Radio stuff that we did to demonstrate the visual power of medium, I don't think there's anybody who works in commercial radio who doesn't want to see radio revenues increase. So I think, you know, yes, languages are different, audiences are different, but I think, you know, the point that I made is if you can identify that cause, like the Mental Health Minute, it crosses all those boundaries and the rules and regulations and that kind of thing. So absolutely, yeah, there's huge opportunity.
Yes, I think as well. Are there any questions from out of the audience? Yes, over there. You get a mic.
Yes, there. Andre from Swedish Radio. I just have a question about the minute you choose, because that minute is not a very big minute here in Sweden where a lot of people listen to the radio. Why did you choose 10:59?
Yeah, 10:59 a.m. I always want to ask Roger this question, actually, who told us it, but apparently it is the time when they make the big announcements. It's mid-morning. The other thing is, don't forget, we were asking commercial broadcasters to give up a minute of ad break, and they are so fully booked during breakfast time. So we did have a bit of a dream initially, but actually it's that time during the day when a lot of people are by themselves, a lot of people play the radio at home while they're working, you know, you might be on a coffee break. Actually, in the mornings, you'd be racing around, you know, maybe taking the kids to school or trying to get to work. You wouldn't focus on it. I think it was a good time, actually, on reflection.
The other two things as well is, 10:59 leads into 11, which on almost every radio station, I'd imagine, across Europe, is the news. So it always is that the first news bulletin is about the Mental Health Minute. So it just amplifies that message. So it's a really good time in that sense. Also, the biggest radio show in Europe is on in that time slot. So it's a really, really big time for listening. And obviously, with changing working patterns over the last few years, it's increasingly become a very popular time to listen to radio. So we may have slightly stumbled into that daytime, but the 10:59 a.m. leading into the news was very deliberate.
There's nothing to do with the number 11, which is always the craziness.
Well, it was
number.
That as well, obviously.
Well, it ends at 11. How about
that?
As
well.
Yes, that's true.
Thought
that's
that
true.
through.
Are there any other questions? Then,
There's
sorry, one more, and it's the last one. Looking at the time. Oh,
needs to turn on.
We can hear you.
Now, short question. How was the digital audio? Was it taken into account in this also? So it played in FM radio and also IP radio.
So I mean, I like Mark answer for him, but for us, it was every radio station that has a broadcast license.
Yeah. So the reach of 20 million came from all
Every
radio sources.
single, all 500 radio stations.
So as long as they are licensed, they can run it.
Yeah.
So if it's like an internet station done out of someone's bedroom, no.
And I think we've got the last question over there. Yes.
Thanks. For Mark, I was thinking, do you have a magic Avengers Assemble button? Because, okay, I guess it takes a lot of organization to put an ad like father-in-law. But in the case of Dolores, the death of Dolores, that happened overnight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's the thing. You know, we started working collaboratively in Ireland between the IBI and RT, the state broadcaster, in 2009. So, you know, we're used to it. I wasn't part of it at the start, but I would imagine it was quite touchy. You know, between independent stations and also to work with the state broadcaster, we fight amongst ourselves like all good families. But I think the more you do it, the more it becomes comfortable. I think, you know, had we not been working collaboratively, we couldn't have done something like the Dolores tribute. But because it's something that now is second nature to us, we're used to it, we all row in behind it. When something like that happens, we can turn around very quickly, and we all know it's for the greater good. So I think familiarity breeds that response.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
And in 10 minutes, I ask you to come back, because then we have 3 people on stage who are going to tell how to increase your revenue.
Great.
Always great to hear.